Welcome back to another Fight Chat Friday from Taekwondo Coach Academy. We're Adrian Byrne and Richie Ford, and Taekwondo Coach Academy is our way of sharing ITF Taekwondo coaching content, some training content, and some competition footage, and giving our take on it and on how to improve what we're doing. So if you're an ITF Taekwondo athlete or coach and you'd like to join a community of like-minded people to improve your knowledge and your understanding of ITF Taekwondo, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the little bell so you're always up to date with the latest of our content. Richie, do you want to tell us what we're going to be looking into today?
Yeah, so from the heading and the title, obviously, you can see that we're going to take a little bit of a look at the back kick here today. So the back kick, you might know it as Dwit Chagi, spinning back kick, backside kick, or simply as the back kick. So obviously spinning kicks are generally highly linked to Taekwondo, more than the other martial arts. So the spinning kicks are very prevalent in our own sport. And we have a different types of the back kick here as well. You have attacking and retreating back kick. So we'll have a look at some of them today. And then within those as well, you have a kind of like a circular motion within the technique and a more direct motion, so between you and the opponent. So we'll have a bit of a look at those today, and talk through the efficiency of the techniques with each one. Of course, it's a very powerful technique, so you'll see this one used a lot as a stopping technique. So usually that's why we see it more on the defensive side to stop oncoming, rushing opponents. It's very rare to see it as an attacking technique in ITF sparring, but because of that, then once it does come up, it catches people by surprise. So as a result, you can use that as an attacking technique as well and catch people off guard a little bit. So therefore, it can be quite effective as well. The frequency with this technique, it's not very, very common, but you will see guys who are quite good at it. They will be able to fit it in quite often, and it will pop up very often in their bouts. So it's either something that you kind of lean towards as your defensive retreating technique, or you don't really. So that's really where you'd see it either features a lot or it wouldn't feature at all. So we'll see some clips here today, particularly with Sanel and Timothy Boss, where you see it is a little bit of a back and forth. So I think that actually poses a nice question of, do you think that the back kick is underused in ITF sparring? So maybe you can drop that in the comments there and leave that and give us your thoughts on that. Why you think it's overused or underused? Why you think it could be used a bit more efficiently and things like that. So we'll also just take a quick look today at some of the techniques that will be linked to the back kick. So you'll see it very often linked with hands. So when somebody is punching either your opponent or yourself, or also you'll see it as with a turning kick, usually to the body. It's a nice little setup with that as well. So the setups are something that you'll see that anybody who can do this technique really well will almost kind of set traps and lower you into like a dead space. So that's where the timing and the distance then becomes very, very important. So we'll go through some of that today. Adrian will leave us know about that in a second with some things like the switches and the retreat steps and things like that. So it's very, very common to see this in a continuation as well as a stopping technique. So you might see it in like a big combination. So yeah, Adrian, do you want to just go through some of the things we'll be looking at in our video today?
Yeah, sure. So as Richie has been saying there, we will definitely have a look at the different styles of back kick. So whether it's on the spot, an attacking back kick, or a switching back kick in a defensive sense. We'll look at having it as the end of a combination or as an exit strategy to get you out of a close contact combination. And we'll have a look at, or an overview of some of the general principles of the technique, kind of based on the examples that we've picked out. So we might just jump into it right away and have a look at one or two good examples of the technique where it lands. But before we do that, again, if you haven't gotten the chance just yet, do like this video and hit that subscribe button, and we'll jump right into it with a little bit of Eno here. And this is from the European Championships in the final against Hong Louis. And we can see it very much the classic, this is how we'd expect to see a back kick thrown. This just, it comes up this way over and over and over again.
Yeah, so you can see here that Ian sets it up very nicely. One thing that I think is very, very important to note here is the balance. So you can just see just before he throws this, he'll just shift, retreat, bump, and see that little bounce there? That just gives him a second to set his feet and balance, which is so, so important. And a lot of people who won't be so effective with this technique will miss out on that part, where you just give yourself the opportunity to set the feet, get the balance, and then switch the feet. So you're switching your front foot and putting it in the place where the back foot was. And then as you do that, the kick comes around and it puts your foot right in a straight line in the dead space between you and the opponent. So yeah, very nice shot here from Ian.
Yeah, and that little extra bounce or the achievement of balance, is something that people can use as well if their normal stance isn't helpful for the back kick. So one of the things that limits your ability to throw that back kick is having more of a half facing or full facing stance. So this is easier the more side facing you are. And you'll even find if a person has their back leg, their trailing leg, even slightly behind, so completely closing off their stance, it means the back kick is, it's already preloaded. It's in a very easy position to throw that shot because you're not having to work around or come around your own body. So it does make the switching of the feet that little bit easier. And as Ian comes back into that bounce, his feet will just turn sideways and he's in a slightly better position then to throw it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing as well I particularly like with this one is the fact that Ian gets his heel quite close to his backside. So that means is in the space, then Hong is quite close to him there, but he still is able to get that kick off because the foot is so close to his body. Whereas if the heel was a bit lower, then he wouldn't be able to get it into that tight space. So if you're looking to get this shot off effectively, I would definitely look at keeping that heel very close to the backside. Because it just gives you a bit more leeway, especially at that higher level when people will be faster and a little bit closer.
And that gives us a good segue into what happens if the space does develop. And we have this little clip with Andre Lee from 2013. And you can see if the space does develop a little more and your heel is close to your backside, the kick can travel up the body that little bit. And because it follows a straight line, it's not going to miss when it goes a little too high. So I suppose the intent generally when you're starting off with a switch back kick is you're going to get your heel just above the belt right into that, like the center of mass of the body. And if it drifts, if the space develops a little bit more, and you can see there where the attacker in this case hasn't how would you say, they haven't gone straight through with the blitz there. It's kind of moved and stopped. It's let the space develop. And because of that, Andre's leg's been able to drift up a little bit, being able to come up past that or along that center line, and it's almost up in the jaw at that stage. So, an accidental 3 points is never a bad 3 points,
Yeah, definitely. And one of the factors I think contributes to this as well is the fact of the knees are quite close. Yeah. So when you can bring those knees very tight together, it means it makes that straight line between you and the opponent. So we'll see some examples later of more of a circular technique, which we kind of noted is a little bit more effective when you change it to either on the spot or more of an attacking technique, where all these ones are more retreating and on the defensive. So as a result, it's very, very important that as you switch the body back to create space, so that's the whole idea of switching, is to create the space between you and the opponent to compensate the distance they're moving forward. So then as a result, you're putting your foot in that dead space in a straight line. And by keeping the knees super tight together, it allows you to actually put it in that direct space rather than maybe avoiding around the opponent and missing.
So maybe that's one of the first kind of training cues that you give to someone is that, if you are going to be traveling backwards with the back kick, to avoid overspinning, and therefore missing the person on the, and spinning past them. One of the things that you'll need to do is make sure the knees are kept close together and it straightens out the technique. So that's one of the coaching cues that we're going to be giving the whole time is squeeze the knees. And as you said, then you've got the high heel lift. So you might look at, sticking with that particular style of it, maybe we'll jump to the more rounded technique a little bit later. We'll have a look at using the technique as an exit or as a finisher. And we had Ukraine on the receiving end in the last one, but here's Katja Solvay very much on the delivery side of things. And I would tend to refer to this as an exit strategy. The combination is done. She's got her scores. She has her back to the center of the ring. And this is a great opportunity to just put a final statement or a full stop on it, give the judges a bit of time to push the button. And she's not, she's not conceding anything. She had the center of the ring. She had pole position anyway. So it really just does put kind of like a nice, clear, full stop at the end of a combination.
Yeah, and this is naturally this kick is naturally like a space creator as such as well. So you can see there as she lands that kick, it just creates that gap between them. So as you said, the fact that she's on the opponent's side of the ring, we'll say it gives her plenty of space to move back into the center. Where often we'll see this because it's under retreat, usually we'll see it more towards the edges, and
Yeah.
people may give away warnings, or they may even land a kick but end up landing outside of the ring, and they won't get the score for it. So it's always good to have that nice bit of leeway behind you there, having some extra space. And again, we can see, as we mentioned earlier as well, that it's quite common to come off a punching sequence, just like this one here again. So
Yeah.
when somebody is punching, this technique is always in play.
Yeah, and I really just wanted to bring this clip up to show as well the what can happen. And I think this one just about lands in the ring, but it's so common that this can happen. You can pick the shot just a little bit too late, and before your feet hit the ground, you've traveled outside of the ring. But one of the providers, anytime you pick a technique, it's more than just a scoring attempt. It's got to do a little more for you. And you take, a little bit of give and take in terms of what the technique gives to you and what it takes away. And there's no two ways about it, but when you throw a retreating back kick like that, you're giving up ring position and ring space. So that can be good and bad. But in this case, you can see there's the score, but there's also a warning. And I mean, most fighters any day of the week are going to take a score and give a warning, and they're fine with that. But again, our sport is scored from 4 separate corners. So the likelihood is the judge we're seeing in that back corner cannot score this technique. They don't see it. And potentially the judge on the other side. So we might only get one judge seeing this and all 4 seeing the warning. So there's a relative value of that. That shot in the middle of the ring has a higher value than that shot here on the corner.
Even despite the fact that the guy here on the opposite side is clearly after getting hit with this shot.
Yeah.
It's quite obvious he's after being hit with it. But the rules state that if you make contact and one of the corner referees cannot actually see that contact directly and very clearly, they unfortunately can't score that. So even despite the fact that it's very, very clear that he's after getting hit with that to the body, as you said, it can be a factor there that maybe only 1 or 2 judges could score that.
Yeah, and I think the trade-off when you throw a technique, is important to consider as well. So, as coaches, sometimes you start by teaching a technique that's out of context, and the back kick out of context, in some ways, it's counterintuitive. It's like, why do we throw something that goes away from the person, that gives up space, that, that maybe puts us in a disadvantageous position because our back is turning? But like we can see in most of these examples, as the person is throwing the shot, they're not really at risk of being scored on. So sometimes it's seen as like it's a counterattack or an attack that has very, very little risk, of a direct counter. The risk comes to the position afterwards. Is where you end up.
Yeah, and just as you said, when we talk about that as well, I will often see some of the younger kids who are just maybe yellow belt, green belt, starting off with this sport. They'll be naturally inclined to maybe turn away from punches, but that will actually nicely set up the back kick. So it's a good opportunity for those type of kids who aren't fond of taking a punch in the face and they will naturally turn away, that you can actually use that to set up the momentum of the back kick. So then it can be actually quite useful for people who are in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. Throw on a clip here that's a little bit more playful as it happens. It was it's what you might call a bit of a friendly competition match here. So the guys have trained together for years, would be somewhat friendly, but it is still very much competition. And Thomas has thrown a few jazzy shots there, but it does set him up very, very nicely for that back kick. And you can see when you've created that position and you're no longer traveling or to the edge of the ring, you're not conceding anything now. Now you can actually move back. You can give up the space at the end of the back kick, and you can create a wide circle off of it. So if Eddie can keep coming forward after this, Thomas has the option to follow the back edge of the ring around and to make a big circle as he was starting here. And it takes away some of the disadvantages of it, and it's only a change in the position that you've sought out. So. But again,
this one as well is kind of like we said earlier in the intro of like setting this technique up, and almost like having a plan to set a trap. So you can see here as Thomas sets it up, it's almost so inviting for Eddie to just launch forward and hit him with that front hand. It's almost too good to pass up. So he goes for that, and then boom, it just creates that little setup of the back kick.
And then by complete contrast in style, then we can have an attacking setup. So you were talking about the different ways in inviting the hands onto it, and in this case, it's you can see how close Timmy is here when the shot is thrown. you really are inviting the hands when the head is that close to your opponent. You know, it's
Mm.
just the reach out and touch me kind of feeling. And I think all of the other training that we do will condition us to want to go to hands when you find your opponent lands that close. And I mean, you'd find that even with beginners training that it's natural. You know, if a person kicks and overextends, you know, and you see the foot landing there in front of you, you just want to go forward with the hands. And it's a very hard reflex to fight. And you probably shouldn't, because it's most of the time a great decision. Um, but in this case, you end up just that little bit and the space is there. But we have a different style of technique thrown by both fighters here. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so you can see here Timmy almost sets his feet and they're almost together, and he launches into it almost. I would call it more of a back, sorry, more of an attacking one. But you can
Yeah.
see the kind of the more of a circular motion. He really spins the hips into it. So there's a little bit of a spin on that in terms of more of a circular motion, and you can see it here. And then as Sanel goes with it, he kind of goes a bit more of a circular motion as well, but
Yeah.
his back is more facing to Timmy here. So one, he actually steps into that there, Timmy, and then this one here is a kind of a bit more of a retreat one again from Sanel. So he senses that the hands are there in this, and then boom, he tries to retreat with that back kick again, kind of like the ones we've seen already. Where Timmy here, he steps through and then he goes forwards with it. So he's not really retreating there. He's using the previous attack again to set his opponent up, knowing that like at this high level, most of the sequences will come where somebody will initiate, and then there's a couple of techniques back and forth, and they're trying to almost like out counter each other. So you see that here, where I'm going, you're going, I'm going, you're going. So if you can almost be that like step ahead and have an idea of what you want to do next, I think that's very, very useful. And Timmy does it here really well, where he launches with that back leg, but he knows already that he's going to come with that back kick next. So he launches and then boom. He just waits for that split second for Sanel to launch in, because again, like we talked about, it's enticing. You feel like, okay, the helmet is there for me to reach, and then boom, he just sets up that back kick then even again.
Yeah, I think as a concept, you know, when you go back to your beginner level again, you're entitled, or you tend to think of a counterattack as somebody attacks and so I have to counterattack,
Mm.
rather than the step two to an attack. So, you know, the nature is that, you know, things happen in a nice sequence where I attack, you counterattack, you attack, I counterattack. But it can be I
Almost
create a
taking turns.
miss. Yeah, so you want to create a situation where it's like I'm giving you the miss so you feel you can counterattack me so that I can then
Yeah.
throw my counterattack to what, you know, and there's a relationship. So when you throw that turning kick off the back leg, or when you throw that, say, long side kick, the expectation is that your partner or your opponent will give a certain amount of space and counter in a particular way. So you're giving them or feeding them what they want. So you're
Mm.
feeding their reflexes or their perceptions by showing them what they want to see and what leads to the counterattack. You know, you're actually inviting them into your next shot. So that's why you will see people practice things like, and certainly I would have trained with Thomas Bradas, who would have been potentially coaching Samuel, or certainly would have done plenty of squad sessions with Samuel over the years, where we would have worked a missed turning kick into a back kick. You know, that
Yeah.
would have been something we'd have worked. And then we saw in the earlier clip where with Thomas, the downward kick into the back kick, which was something that we used to do quite a lot of, again, with Willie Van der Mortel and with Master Edit. So, you know, when you see these combinations, that, you know, what they're trying to attack, no matter which coach it is that thinking of, it's much better to tell your opponent what to throw. That makes your counter much easier. Where if you're waiting and reacting, your chances are pretty poor. But if you're feeding them the information that they need to give you a counter, or, you know, give you something that you can predict, it's going to work much, much better.
Definitely. And I think that that's the case with, I would say, 90% of back kicks that do land quite flush and nicely, apart from the ones that we've seen earlier from the
Yeah,
likes
like Ian.
of Ian,
Yeah.
for example, where that was just a direct retreat. Obviously, he's not really setting that up. It's more of a reaction shot there, a
Yeah.
stopping technique, where the rest of them, they're all kind of coming off a continuation of a combination of another shot. So you might see it coming off hands often, you might see it coming off a downward kick here, like we do with Thomas, or a back leg turning kick to the body, or even like we see Makachi there as well. It was a
Yeah.
similar, both of those techniques. You have the turning kick to the body, axe kick, and then the back kick. So I think that those little techniques work really well together to set it up. It's just the way that the body will naturally turn and things like that. It just sets it up really, really nice.
Yeah, and like one of the things we can say about this rounder shot is that it's the nature of how the body is moving, and you could try and fight it as you would in pattern, and constrain the shot, keep the knee, the knee down, and and force it into the back kick shape. But because you're spinning about your axis and carrying forward, there's going to be, no matter what, an additional rounding once that leg wants to stretch. So it is going to come around a little bit more. And often when we're teaching, like, the disadvantage of that is if the person's in the right position, they can step through to your backside and it's going to shoot on past them. But
Yeah.
again, they have to know it's coming. It has to be in the right moment. And when you've set it up like this, it can be perfect. As a kind of the same style, we have Jenny here, and we've tagged this like a finishing segment. Jenny will often put this just at the end of a sequence, much like Katja had earlier. But it does come in that rounder, off the turning kick and stepping into it. This isn't a switch kick at all.
And I think that the fact that when we seen Timmy, there was a stop and a set the feet and shoot, whereas here it's coming off the hands, so it's kind of like as she's moving. So Jenny does a great job of actually being able to have her feet on balance here and to throw it at the end of the turning kick, so it just comes in nicely where there's no set. It's almost done as she's stepping, so you see it right here. So because of that, then it naturally becomes more of a circle, just the way that the body moves. So it naturally will become more of a turn when you're attacking rather than that direct one that we've seen. And we kind of seen that earlier as well with Sanel. We mentioned the whole idea of the knees. You see here that the knees kind of come apart a little bit more, and I think that's one of the telltale signs of the more circular one.
Yeah.
Where you almost come around your opponent to the side. So you see she comes around this kick from the Finnish girl here as well. So when you're countering a direct kick like that, you can kind of come around more in that circular motion. So you'll see it right here. It just allows you to come around the kick. So I think that's another feature of this more attacking version as well.
I think there's some really nice bits in how Jenny's done this here against Mira, where there's a few things that will be going on, probably very subconsciously in Mira's head, although she may well be thinking about it. There's a gap that's created. Jenny stops with the hands, giving Mira enough time before the edge to stop before she travels. And that then creates that feeling of, I have a foot outside the ring, I have to go forward, which puts her back onto the back kick. And the combination of that is one where I've often had it with competitors where they follow through the hands the whole way. And when you watch it back in slow motion, maybe there's only one punch that actually lands nice and clean for the judges to score. So you've put in that huge effort to drive the person back, to get all that ring space, get the warning, and maybe you get one punch on target. Whereas by stopping that little bit earlier and going back to the legs, Jenny achieves a couple of things. There's a split in the rhythm here. There's a gap in the space and a vacuum between the two fighters, and that kind of negative pressure of the edge of the ring that Mira kind of has to step into. Because she's even so far back with the foot outside the ring there, she can't go left to right. She has to go forward. So it's creating a lovely opportunity and space to make that back kick work. And I think it's done really, really nicely in that clip.
And I think it's set up, as we mentioned earlier, really nice from that turning kick as well, because you can see as the turning kick comes through, it almost rotates the hips for Jenny to naturally set up that kick. So you'll see it right here now. It just turns the hips for her. So all she has to do is set her feet, and that position is already set up nicely for the back kick. So it's really, really well done, and she does a great job of setting her feet correctly for it. And it's really nice.
Yeah, and for me, I think the turning kick also acts as a safety. So if Mira doesn't make the appropriate space, she gets hit with a turning kick and Jenny follows with hands. But if she does make the appropriate space, the turning kick misses and sets up the spin. So you've got you have a natural kind of inbuilt feel to how the whole technique works, that it's going to feel natural, because if the turning kick misses, you're already starting your spin. It fixes the spin for you. You're not going to end up, because if you miss with the turning kick and your foot comes to the ground without the back kick, you're probably overly turned and your opponent pushing in with hands has your back. So it gives you that, that safety. So for me, I think I just like how it works, or as a combination in every sense, both from like the attacking rhythm of it, the position of it, the spacing of it, using the person's kind of natural instincts and reactions against them. I think it just works really, really nicely.
Yeah, and this is actually something that's very, very common as well, that you'll see after hands. It'll be somebody who tries to get that kick to the body after the punching sequence.
Yeah.
Usually they get rewarded by the judges. So usually both competitors are fighting for this if it comes to a hand situation where both people are punching. So it will come to a situation where both people will be looking for that kick, and if you just miss it, it's a nice way to have that, like almost like a backup and using that back kick. So it's a nice little thing to maybe link together with that turning kick after a hand punching sequence.
Sure. So, are there any kind of key takeaways that we want to highlight out of all of this? Because, like for me, it's definitely felt like every clip has a couple of key little points because the kick is different done in attack and defense, and depending on its application. So, is there any kind of key common takeaways you want to highlight from this one?
Yeah, definitely. I think the important part, if we just break it up firstly into attacking and retreating, on the retreat, I think it's very, very important that you adjust that distance. So as your opponent is coming forward, that you can adjust that distance with them. So it moves with them. So there's not really any gap that's being squeezed by your opponent.
Yeah.
And if it does get squeezed, at least you have that idea of keeping the heel nice and close to the body, just in case the distance is super close.
Yeah.
So when you look at that retreating one, I would really focus on keeping that distance and maintaining that space, and then putting your kick in that direct line of space. So I think that that's a very important factor on the retreat one, and it's almost a universal principle on any retreating or defensive back kick.
Yeah, so whether it's the back kick or the side kick, one of the cues that I always give is try and keep the distance between your faces the same. So for whatever reason, the distance between the bodies the same and doesn't connect as well for an awful lot of the people to be working with. But it's like, keep that distance between your head and their head the same. That helps the kick to find its space. So then on the
I think
attacking,
another idea then with the attacking one is to almost set it up off another technique. So it's very rare that you'll see it just as a direct shot.
Sure.
So you almost have to be that step ahead. So if you start to link it in your sparring, where you go sparring and you're going to say, right, every time I throw a turning kick here today, I'm going to seize the opportunity for a back kick to naturally come with it.
Yeah.
I think if you can just start from that position, it's a great place to be in. And same with the things like the axe kick, particularly off the back leg, as we've seen with Thomas there as well, that's a nice natural setup for that back kick. So I think it's a good thing to be able to do, to just in case you're out of range, that might entice the opponent to come into hands, and then that will set you up for the back kick. So it might be something to be thinking about the next time you spar, and be actively thinking about that opportunity.
And I think from a training point of view, and we're always going to bring it back to being representative, like if we have a person where you have, for example, a side kick or a downward kick and a back kick available to them, and you're telling them, yeah, look, we want you to score that first shot and to kick long sometimes. So it gives them that option to, as I said, throw the side kick long and land in distance and see from there, can you get the back kick? Can you save yourself and get back out of space? And it also then invites the other person who we maybe give hands to tease on the distance, to invite that kick to be long, and to sometimes as well maybe mess the whole thing up by going short. By cutting the distance on, and basically making it so that there's no room for the downward kick or side kick. And I think that's the kind of interplay you want. You want the person who's learning this combination or this technique to know that if they oversell the downward kick or the side kick, they're just going to get counted on the first shot. So it has to carry just enough. It has to look just enough like a threat. Realistically, it has to be a threat. Yeah, you have to sell it. And then the back kick can emerge. It's not always going to be there.
There's something that actually links really well with that is the fact that if you see somebody maybe drilling a back kick as a sequence, whatever, you'll see that will happen where they'll just go technique to technique to technique to technique. But you'll notice from all these clips that we use today, the elite guys, they will pick their moment like 100% spot on here with the moment. They set their balance, set the kick, and boom, they're picking the correct moment. They're not just launching it. It's not where, okay, I miss and now I just launch it automatically. They're giving their opponent that split second, maybe it's like a half a second, where they're allowing maybe their opponent to settle and come back in again. And I think that small subtle timing there is very, very valuable, where you'll see people who aren't so experienced, they will just launch into that back kick directly, and often they will probably miss. Where these guys here, the elite guys that we've seen in their clips today, they just pick that moment so precisely that they almost give their opponent a chance to come back in. and they're setting them up for that. So I think that timing is very, very valuable, and you can't learn that timing unless you have an active opponent that you're working with there, you know. Whereas if you just throw it and launch this combination on a pad or on the bag or whatever, you won't be able to pick that timing out correctly because you don't have another human to interact off and perceive how it works. So I think it's very, very important that once you build in this motor pattern initially, that you can almost instantly take it into a live situation, because this is not really something that's going to be able to come into your sparring unless you're able to perceive these things here and then link that back kick with that. So it's very important of what you're seeing and how you link that timing together.
So here's one for you, because my guys will all tell you, everybody hates training back kick, as in they want to do it in pads all day, not a bother. Nobody wants to train it live because it hurts.
Yeah,
because when it lands, when it lands, you're probably winded. It hurts. So you know, some of the things we've done over the years, we do own a full set of Hogus, the WTF body armor. We do train with those. We do allow for some exercises to sell it. You know, we'll bring the glove to the body and we'll make it as realistic as we can, but with a glove on the body or something like that. And then it's not such a problem when they have plenty of experience and their timing is good because they can control the distance. The problem is it's always in that middle space where you're good enough to land it every now and again, but you're not good enough to land it so consistently that you can control your positioning on the target. So my recommendation for people, if you want to practice this live and get the correct sense of timing, and not, because sometimes you get a false sense of this works because your opponent hesitates because they're afraid of the back kick. We don't want them to be afraid of the back kick. We want them to challenge the back kick. So for me, unfortunately, I think the best solution I've found for that is put on a bit of body armor every now and again and go for that to the point where if I pull the body armor out of the storage cupboard in the gym, the guys probably know what the session is. You know, it's one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point. And it's kind of like we touched on that with the axe kick in our last video as well. That is probably one of the reasons why we don't see it being trained representative so much, because we're just conscious of that head trauma being a bit too common, you know. So it's the same thing here. Nobody wants to eat a back kick a couple of times a session. So we have to get creative there and find ways to come around that problem.
Perfect. So I think that's us for today then. I have nothing else I want to add about the back kick for just now, but if you do have any questions, please make sure you put them in the comments below and we will or hit us up on Instagram. We will definitely come back and answer those questions.
Yeah, and obviously we mightn't have hit every single thing there on the back kick today, so if you have some of your own suggestions or some of your own ideas, make sure and drop them into the comments below and we'll get back to you and we'll have a little bit of discussion there, and hopefully people can pick up on that. So yeah, that's the whole idea of our videos here, is just sharing knowledge and information about ITF sparring, and the more people that get involved in the conversation, the better it is for everybody. Yeah. So just like that as well, that's the whole idea where maybe you're more inclined to give the video a like and things like that, because that expands the range of potential people in our group and in our sphere that are going to be able to come across these videos. So it's better for everybody then that we can get that conversation going, whether it's on social media, on the comments in our posts, or whether it's here underneath the video. So the more healthy and good discussions that we have on these topics, I think the better it is to push our sport forward, and the better it is for everybody.
Super.
And of course, if you're enjoying our content, make sure and hit that subscribe button as well so you don't miss any of our future videos. So hope you enjoy this one, and till the next one, thanks for watching. See you then.
Bye bye.